Hi, this is the Patrick Show, your one-stop shop for everything global news and politics. Welcome to the show for the week of January 8th. A bunch of stuff happened this week, so I'm trying to get to some of the big stuff. Trump made an appointment for his senior advisor, which really caught my eye and kind of threw some red flags for me. Um, I don't know what it is with Trump and appointing people to positions that they seem woefully unqualified for, but just one more in the line of people that that don't seem expressly qualified for the jobs that he's asking them to do. This week we saw him appoint son-in-law Jared Kushner as one of his senior advisors, despite Jared having no prior political experience or uh, really anything, and even also just another list amid a variety of concerns with nepotism and conflicts of interest that have just been plaguing all of his appointments. Up until now, Jared has been a property developer with like a variety of business interests, um, but apparently Trump lawyers have managed to find a way around anti-nepotism laws in order in order for them to even consider Jared Kushner as a valid appointment. But what'll be a little more interesting to see if they can actually divest Jared of all of his business ventures, given the size of the real estate business his family is associated with, in order for him to pass the ethics review. So we'll see what happens with that. I'll be a little surprised if that one gets through, but I mean, Trump wouldn't do it if he didn't think it could be done. So we'll see how that ends up. In politics, also across the pond, Jeremy Corbyn was being goofy this week. So for those of you that aren't familiar with British politics, Jeremy Corbyn is the leader of the Labour Party, which is like the left wing of parliamentary politics, and he he was the leader of the Labour Party, and he's already in kind of not in the best of graces with British politics. He managed to somehow survive a vote of no confidence after Brexit passed, just because he's been kind of rubbing his party the wrong way, pretty much with all of Brexit and since then. And then he came forward this week with a rather absurd suggestion, calling for the implementation of a maximum wage in Britain, which I mean is the fears that resulted in this suggestion were valid. The increasing inequality with wages in the UK and in many other countries around the world, it's a valid concern, but a maximum wage is not the way to do it. If you know anything basic about economics, you'll understand that maximum wages are not the way to approach really anything, because once a person reaches, like, once they make all of that cap, make up to that cap, there's gonna be no incentive for them to work anymore. So, what are you gonna do then? So it's just another goofy comment from Jeremy Corbyn. Maybe next time he'll think a little bit before he speaks, and we might actually get some decent suggestions out of him. In Afghanistan, five diplomats from the UAE were killed Tuesday in a bombing. It's too soon to tell who's behind the bombing, although interestingly, the Taliban has explicitly denied having a hand in it. Usually, a lot of terrorist groups are very quick to to claim attacks, but the original assumption of it being the Taliban was quickly put out when they actually explicitly denied having a hand in this attack. The blast targeted a guest house of an Afghan governor, and it killed a total of 11 people, including the five diplomats, and wounded 18 from a bomb that was believed to have been hidden in a sofa. I guess there's a construction project at the house, and that allowed for the bomb to be planted. I don't know. We're gonna be interested to see if they ever get any further information. There are some suspects arrested and in custody, but I'll have to keep an eye out to see if there's any further developments with that. And finally, in a really big move, President Obama repealed the wet foot, dry foot policy. Now, this was something that I really wasn't aware of. I was only like passively aware of. But it's a huge move by Obama with in relation to the American relations with Cuba. The wet foot, dry foot policy was a revision of the 1966 Cuban Adjustment Act, put in by President Johnson, which allowed Cubans to come to America. But the issue with the Cuban Adjustment Act is it just kind of assumed that everyone leaving Cuba was a political refugee and like required asylum for survival. And but it was adjusted in 1995, and it basically states that if Cubans are trying to come to America, which there's no way for them to do that legally that I'm aware of, so if they're caught on water, then they have to be sent back to Cuba. But if the Cuban immigrants are found on American soil, then there is a plan of action to actually keep them here in America and even apply for legal permanent residency. And Obama repealed that part. The Cuban Adjustment Act still is in place and has not been entirely repealed, but this basically, the removal of the wet foot, dry foot amendment basically guts the utility of the Cuban Adjustment Act, but it also reflects a shift in at least our political outlook on Cuba. By not just assuming that everyone is a political refugee requiring asylum from Cuba, that really it shows a shift towards a more positive opinion of Cuba, and it'll definitely is a sign of improving relations with Cuba and America. However, this still is getting mixed reactions from both Cubans and Americans. So we'll see how that moves in the future, and if we will see Obama or even Trump try and remove the Cuban Adjustment Act entirely, or how Cuban immigration also shifts under the Trump administration. Well, that's it for this week's episode. If there is anything that crosses your desk that you want to put onto mine, feel free to put something in the comments section below. If you want to read anything further about any of the stories I talked about here today, there's also links in the description for further reading. And as usual, I will see you next week.